Hello everybody, my name is Liz Mosley, I'm an editor here at Tortoise, and welcome to the third Thinking of this week. We've done Thinkings, special ones this week, all sort of thinking about the life and the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II, but also in her death. This evening we're going to talk about grief and mourning and bereavement and the interplay of all of those things and those experiences. And thank you very much, everybody, for being here. There's some people here that haven't been before. There's some familiar faces. Welcome back. Even some people who have come already once this week back again. It's quite a difficult conversation to have, I think. I hope we'll do it justice. The idea of a thinking is that, and you will notice, those of you who've been before, there's nobody sitting up here with me. Sometimes we have sort of the stars of the show or you know, invited experts, we call them, who sort of frame the discussion for us. Very purposefully this week we haven't done that because we wanted to make sure that everybody was sort of on a level playing field, if you like. It's sort of even, we're all experiencing this in our own different ways, but sort of together in some way. And the idea is that everybody's perspective and experience and story is equally valid as we sort of figure it out. I know that there are people also watching at home, so if you're here, nice to see you, Zav. My colleague is going to look after you in the chat, so please don't feel shy. I'm keen to hear from you, and I won't be able to keep going the whole hour myself anyway, so you'll need to help me out. I might start just to set the tone a little bit with how I feel today. It's a week since the Queen died, and I lost my mum when I was 20, just a few weeks before my 21st birthday, and it was 1997. And most people here will remember that there was another very big moment like this in 1997 in August. My mum died in March, Diana died in August, and to my mind, and it's sort of seared into me, I think, that whole year from March to, well, my mum was poorly as well, so you sort of start grieving for a person before they've quite died when you know it's inevitable a little bit, so probably it is true to say the whole year was like one massive, long, really weird and horrible funeral in some way, shape or form. It felt like there was talk of death everywhere. And it felt also to me like when Diana died, the country was discovering a new way. It was setting new norms, new standards, new templates almost for what we do when somebody who was loved, whatever that word may mean, means different things, dies. And in all honesty, the strongest emotion I felt at the time was anger, because I honestly thought, what you people in Green Park with your teddy bears and your flowers are feeling is nothing compared to what I am going through. And I have a little bit of that anger back. So that is not to say I'm judging anybody for joining the queue or doing the condolences or in any way trying to minimise it, but I have noticed in myself quite quickly I started feeling irritated. And I know that that is because all that thing that happened to me when I was 20 is back, because it looks the same. Gates, flowers, queues, the newspapers look the same. The flag on, like, all of that stuff, it's sort of all those symbols that unearths it all. And I think that I've read, and I'm sure you have too, lots of people saying that the grief that people are experiencing, the set of emotions, because I think grief is a combination of emotions, isn't it? All at the same time and sequentially. The things that people are feeling, whatever they might be doing, down at the palaces or at home or anywhere in between, on trains, you know, all the things that people have been experiencing, lots of it is to do with the triggering of other things. And I'm really interested to try and explore today the relationship between the thing and the other things, and how the things that we're doing, each of us and collectively, do or don't help the processing of those emotions. I'm really interested to kind of pick away at it. So I've started us off. Who feels brave to talk about how they feel today, 7 days after? Hello, what's your name? Can we get you a mic so we can hear you? What's your name? Sorry.
Monique.
Hi, Monique.
Hi.
Nice to see
Thanks
you.
for having me. What you're saying about 1997 really resonates with me because I lost my best friend literally a month before Princess Diana died.
Yes.
And what I remember very clearly was not feeling very much when he died. And then when Diana died, the floodgates kind of opened. It was almost like because everybody else was mourning, I had permission to actually start mourning. So that's really what it did for me. And the Queen dying, what you're saying really resonates because it brings back, those images kind of bring back that year and that time.
I'm really interested in that word, permission to mourn.
Yeah, because I think I felt I just had to hold it together. And also, I didn't really actually feel very much. And I think this is something that I've been discussing quite a bit with clients this week, that we really need to make space for allowing everybody to feel what they're feeling, whether they feel anger or sadness or they don't feel anything at all. That's also possible and valid. And I think I can say that now because I realized at the time I didn't feel very much. And I did find that quite weird as well. But yeah, Diana's death almost sort of gave me permission to also feel so because everybody else was upset.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you think it was helpful or not?
I think so, because finally I was feeling something.
Yeah, it unlocked something, and then you're on the journey
exactly,
then. Yeah,
exactly. And of course, like you say, there is something like displaced grief, where if you're not grieving, then you're going to be expressing it perhaps later in life, or it comes out as anger, or it can come out as a physical ailment. So I think it's important to go through the stages of grief, which, as you already said as well, aren't linear and aren't necessarily neat and tidy, and you can go back and forwards. And I think that the Queen dying, certainly for me, has kind of taken me back to some of the earlier stages of grief that I felt at the time when my friend died. And my dad died when I was 12. And my brother died 7 years after my friend died. So it does take me back to these different experiences.
Interesting. Thank you very much for.
Thank you for letting me speak.
No, it's a pleasure and brave to go first. So thank you for that too. I'm tempted to bring in Connie. I'm not going to say she's a plant. She's not a plant. She's just has some form in this area. Connie, just introduce yourself a little bit, and we'll hear who you are.
Yeah. So my name is Connie, and I'm a clinical psychologist working in private practice in London. And I was invited today to give a bit of a psychological perspective, particularly around the question, how can it happen that someone we've never known, we experience such intense feelings of grief or sadness for? And I think you've both highlighted something really important here, which is we always experience current events through our own histories, through our own psychologies and losses. And my sense is that the Queen's passing has brought up a lot of unprocessed feelings to do with bereavements in the past, but I would say also with the pandemic and the very solitary grief that people have experienced during this time. The Queen herself as well. I was really thinking of the image of her at Prince Philip's funeral and being completely isolated from her family and sitting there on her own. So I think this collective coming together sort of quite important for the healing process.
So the sense of the pandemic, our recent history, isolated grief, I think was the phrase that you used. And I was just chatting to Matt actually before the thinking this evening, and I am very lucky, I think, in that I don't know anybody close to me who died of COVID. I have friends who lost people close to them, but somehow I got away with it. I don't know why, but I'm interested in that. But still, in COVID, there was so much. We were all isolated from one another. So you're sort of grieving for something, even if not someone. And the idea that London is full, it's the opposite of March 2020. You know, the sort of togetherness of it. We commented on Tuesday as well about how on night that the news broke about the Queen having died, people were talking to each other in public transport, so which is a really unusual and weird thing, and the opposite of having your face mask and trying to keep your distance. There's something quite discombobulating about how extreme the contrast is between those two things.
Yes, I agree. And I was thinking about that word permission to mourn as well. And I think it's also given us permission to come together again after 2-3 years of being told you mustn't come close to anyone and it's dangerous. And you're experiencing grief and losses during this time very much on your own. I think it's been really a powerful opportunity to come together.
Monique mentioned something right at the very end of what she said, which was, if you don't process it, it can come out later. Is that right? Does that really happen?
Yes.
I can see Vivian behind you nodding seriously too. Go on, Connie first, and I might come to Vivian then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we don't process our feelings, don't feel them, they're not going anywhere. They're going to be somewhere stuck within us. They can come out at a later stage, and that can be helpful, but they can also come out in destructive ways that, affect our mental well-being or the well-being of those around us. So it is important to find ways to express our feelings, and however we do that, that's okay. And for some, that might be joining the queue for 30 hours. For others, that might be quite a private thing. So whichever way works for you is a good way of doing that.
Thank you, Connie. We might come back to you. Would you mind passing your mic back to Vivian? Hi, Vivian. Auntie Vivian.
Well, rather like you, I'm sort of associated, but I'm a bereavement counsellor. And so I completely agree with you that if one doesn't get in touch with feelings early on and sublimate the feelings, they can come out in physical ways, different physical ways. And so it's really important that people do actually feel and express what they're feeling. I think there's something as well about collective grief and personal private grief. And I think what happened with both Diana and the Queen not only has given permission, but makes people maybe feel safer getting in touch with their feelings and sharing them and realizing that actually this is normal and to be admired and should not be kept down. So I think that collective grief is what's going on at the moment. But as you and Monica said, one is put in touch with earlier losses, which build on each other. And if you see the photographs in the press of William and Harry walking together behind the Queen's coffin, next to a photograph of them when they were so much younger behind their mothers, imagining what those boys are going through, following that coffin yet again, it's unimaginable, heartbreaking.
Vivian, what are people grieving for?
I think they're grieving for lots of different things depending on their own personal circumstances. But it could be they're put in touch with their grandmother who died or their great-grandmother who died, a friend, an experience. It could be lots of different things depending on how they view the Queen. But it doesn't really even matter how they felt about the Queen. It's what the Queen meant to them.
Seb? Sorry, we're short on mics this evening. Apologies.
I'm just like a bit kind of like struck right now because I think this is like the first time that since she died that I feel like weirdly sad, and I think it's because I feel like I should feel a bit sad right now because I think I don't know, like it's just like.
Do you mean through today or just in this conversation?
Right, like in the last 10-15 minutes I feel like I don't know, I just feel like since it's happened I feel like my circles and all of my friends, I felt like I shouldn't feel sad and almost I should like find the whole thing kind of absurd and silly and like verging on funny, you know? And that's just because like I think in my circles and in the people I surround myself and the things I see online, like this is something to be embarrassed about and not something, you know, like just the structure of the royal family and as British people is something to be embarrassed about and something that we shouldn't feel sad when it kind of comes to a close and things change. But like, I don't know, just in this room right now, I'm struggling to like wrap my head around it, but I suddenly feel like overwhelmingly sad like almost to the point of like, I don't know.
Sorry,
Yeah.
meant to make you sad.
Yeah.
It
But
meant to make
maybe
you-
this is important. I don't know. Maybe I have some deeply rooted like sadness and about the Queen's passing that I'm only finding right now, or maybe it's something like emotions of or discussing emotions or rubs off on you, and so I don't know. It's just a little
Interesting.
input. There you go.
I do. I mean, people do say there's a contagion aspect to it, with particularly with the. It's not only that everybody's sort of feeling it, but the coverage and the telly and the music and the whole sort of performance of it is quite. Although I'm saying that, and it is absolutely escapable. I thought before the Queen died, I thought, oh my goodness, when it happens, it'll be inescapable. But actually, it's very possible to not really notice. Am I right or am I wrong? Yeah, are you Adele? Yes. I was warned about. I've not met Adele before, but Adele is friendly with my colleague Lydia, and she said, "My friend Adele's coming. She's going to wear a denim onesie." And sure enough,
Lydia's
there you are.
I'm here.
Hi, Adele.
Hi. I feel like obviously everyone knows the Queen died, but I've avoided it so much because I don't really watch TV, not in like I don't watch TV way. I just get home from work and I go into my room and chat to my sisters and whatever. I don't have the TV and don't have the news on. If I am, it's like Netflix, and not seen it that way. I don't particularly reach for a newspaper in the morning. I work in food, so like it's not as if we've got lots of current affairs topics laying around, and I feel like I've not sought it out, but so I've not actually really seen much or many comments about it. All I've seen is people making jokes about it on Twitter.
Really?
Like kind of what you were saying, like in my circles, like everyone's kind of like
Interesting.
joking about like the marmalade sandwiches that are rotting outside of Buckingham Palace and the people queuing for 30 hours, and everyone's kind of like saying how absurd it is. But I do agree that I just think now actually talking about it and actually thinking about it, and with you mentioning about Harry and Will walking behind the Queen's coffin, I'd seen that photo too. And that was probably the first time that I was like, gosh, like there are some people who are really struck by this, but somehow obviously Harry and Will, I just mean other people as well. I've managed to just kind of really sit out from it and not feel involved at all. Which I think is weird when everyone around me, or not everyone, but lots of people seem to be really going through the motions of it. And I haven't, but now thinking about it being in here, I touch wood and luckily don't really have much experience with grief in my life. Like all my grandparents are still around and I've been very lucky in that sense. And maybe because I can't attach it to a personal emotion, it doesn't faze me as much. I don't know.
Were you born in? This is a very personal question. Were you born in '97?
I was born in 99.
Okay, so you don't remember that whole thing.
Don't remember that.
Does anybody else not? You don't have that kind of. You don't remember it. You do, but you don't remember it, Chamonix.
I was 3.
Interesting.
It was my first experience.
And how? Sorry. Thanks, James. I'm going to. Katie.
Yeah.
This is my colleague Katie. And how are you finding the whole thing?
Yeah, so what I was saying before I got the mic was that my first memory of knowing what the UK was, because I'm not from here, was watching Diana's funeral on TV with my dad and asking him who is that? And he was like, oh, that's the Princess of Wales. I was like, is she our princess? He was like, no.
She was everybody's princess, just to be clear.
People's princess. Yeah, which is bizarre, but I don't know. It's weird.
Do you feel outside of it?
Yeah.
As because you're not British, or because of another reason?
Yeah, I didn't think I would feel. I mean, Seb is more British than I am, but
a little bit more British than me, to be fair. But yeah,
I thought I would feel sadder. To me, it's a really bizarre sociological look at the country, and I feel emotional about American things that happen, political things that happen in the States, specifically. But yeah, it's weird. I feel very foreign in a way that I haven't in a very long time.
I feel very foreign. Really interesting. Yeah. That's going to go in the notebook. Thank you, Katie. Chamonix, also representing the young people here.
Yes, obviously I don't remember Diana's funeral. I was born, but I don't have any real recollection of that time. I think this whole thing, my godmother died 6 weeks ago.
Oh, Tommy,
it
I'm really
was-
sorry.
It was quite a poignant loss for me. And I think similar to what you said at the beginning, there is that element of like, the Queen wasn't that significant to me. So I felt sad on Thursday, had a long period of not feeling sad, had a period, like Seb, where I was just like, everyone was just like making jokes online. That was mainly what I was seeing. But I never felt like people shouldn't be sad. I was never kind of on the side of like, this is so weird, why does anyone care?
Get a grip kind of thing.
But at the same time, I've had this sort of double layered grief, maybe even triple. There's the sadness about my godmother, and I lost my auntie last year and my grandma last year. Then there's so all of those things start coming up. Then there's the sadness of the Queen dying, or just living through such a momentous occasion, having experienced so many in like what feels like quick succession. And then on top of that, there are images that I've been presented with online. You know, I'm sure many people have heard the discussion about the people in colonial countries or ex-colonial countries who aren't sad, who are actually quite angry. And there are some quite graphic images, you know, dead bodies of people who were killed, in as far as what's being presented to me, in the name of Britain. People who are from Nigeria, which is where my parents are from, which is my lineage. And consuming that media in public or in private adds another layer of, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's a weird duality in my mind of, I'm sad that the Queen has died, but I also understand why people aren't sad and are actually quite the opposite of sad.
Yeah.
And, you know, coming in every day, it can be a bit, again, I think a through line that I've heard in the last 3 thinkings that we've done is there's just weird disorientation that you don't necessarily get with just a one-off moment of grief. The burial happens in a week. It's just kind of continuing. Even if I've avoided it as far as on TV, I work in a news media company, so I hear about it all the time.
Yeah.
I don't really have a conclusion, but that is my current experience of everything that's going on.
Thank you, Chomini. That disorientation is a good term, and I felt it too, because whilst I absolutely take the point that Monique and Vivi have made about permission, other people going through it gives you permission. But I also sort of feel like somehow, for myself, there was also a sort of, because other people are going through it, there's a sort of set way of doing it right, or a sort of things that you are and aren't meant to say or feel. To your point about, you know, is now the time for the colonial conversation? It's felt very present, even though no one said it. And I think that is sort of odd, because then you're not quite sure if what you're feeling is or isn't valid or okay. So you sort of get stuck in a loop a little bit, because you don't want to be a dick about it. You know.
I don't want other people to feel like they can't be sad or grieve, because, as we've all said, this is something that is almost like beyond us. You know, it's kind of like it's bringing up a lot of people who are sad probably aren't sad about the Queen and don't realise that they're not sad about the Queen. They're sad about other things. Yeah, they probably don't even understand that that's what's going on. Yeah, and I don't want to be the one to take it this way when I also kind of am this way.
I wonder if we came back and had this conversation again we're not going to do that, by the way, next Thursday and every Thursday after. I wonder how different the conversation would be, because also I've noticed that the nature of what people have said in the thinkings we've done this week, it's felt a bit different than a normal week. Somehow people are just a little bit more, I think they're listening a little bit more to each other. They're thinking a bit more about what's coming out of their mouths. I don't know if I'm projecting that, but I sort of, do you think the same thing, Mark? I mean, you've sat in lots of thinkings like this. It felt different to me.
Yeah, definitely. People are being a lot more considered in what they're saying. And when we have a thinking about a topic, one of the things that naturally happens is people like to sort of show off a little bit. They like to show off how much they know about a topic, or that they know someone connected to the story, and a little bit of grandstanding goes on. And it's human nature to do that, and that's not a criticism. But this week has been a lot more, I think we've had a lot more things said from the heart a little bit. Yeah.
I wonder if Matt's got his hand up. I'd love to hear from everybody. There's only a few of us here, so we can hear. What do you think, Matt?
Well, lots of things which don't add up to a kind of neat conclusion, but I think everyone, as they get older, has a kind of growing conversation with their own mortality, either subliminal or open. But a parallel conversation to that is the grief conversation, which is everyone else's mortality. And obviously, the older you get, the more people you know who have died. And that conversation becomes more multi-layered, more complicated, more interspliced. And I think it's as important as the mortality conversation, in some respects more. Because it's in my opinion anyway, when I die, I won't know anything about anything. So that'll be that. It'll be for others.
It's going to be a real shock when it happens for you, Matt. But
it's going to be, yeah. I mean, I might get a terrible surprise, on the pearly gates and a very, very big receipt. But I was very interested in what you said about your mother, because that certainly relates to my feelings about my parents. Is that the two expressions I am most allergic to are closure and good innings.
Yeah.
Because even though it's 8 years since my mother died and 3 since my father died, I still think it's a monstrous impertinence that they're dead. Yeah. I really do. I mean,
my mum has stayed dead all this time.
Absolutely. I mean,
for goodness sake.
You are dead a long time.
Yeah.
And they still appear to be dead. And it's an outrage. There's a wonderful line in Auden where he writes about a painting where Icarus is falling into the sea, and a ship goes by taking no notice of it. And I forget the line, but it's the point he's expressing is the outrage that the ship is indifferent to the death of Icarus. And that, I think, expresses a lot of why there is that element of anger in grief that continues. I also think it is, in a non-threatening way, a chronic condition from which you are granted periods of remission. And I think that it has strata. I think that, new grief reminds you of old grief. It aggregates and metastasizes. But the thing that interests me in all this is that, and it relates to what Vivian was saying in a very interesting, which was fascinating to me. There is something called collective grief, which is not the same as individual grief, although the two are intimately entangled. And I'm not quite sure what it is, but let's sort of hazard a definition, which is that it is grief with which we're not personally directly associated, but we still feel. Yeah. And we've had 2 huge doses in quite quick succession. And when you came over earlier, I was watching a preview of a program about a drama about the COVID crisis, starring Kenneth Branagh as Boris Johnson. And I found myself very powerfully moved, perhaps even more moved than I was at the time, by the numbers and the deaths and the sheer scale of mortality that was going on, much of it avoidable. And I thought, there's no way that the feelings I'm experiencing now are not connected to what's going on with the Queen, who was not someone I knew, or And I think there is something called collective grief, which is where you feel a sense that the us, the we, has been depleted in some way. And actually, that you can have simultaneous to that a relationship. It's no accident that a lot of people have connected this with the loss of their mothers or aunties or grandmothers or so. It's obvious what the psychology of that is. But I think it's also possible to feel a grief that is not connected to anything personal, but has something to do with that frayed sense of community we have, and the sense that in some way we can't quite get our heads around. It has been diminished, undermined, overhauled. And we hope that the new king will fill the gap. As we discussed last night, we're not sure whether he will. But that collective grief, which previous generations were very familiar with, is, I think, something with which we struggle now. Partly because one of the weirdnesses of digital technologies, it's incredibly easy. One of the surprises of digital technology is it's incredibly easy to lead a siloed life. You know, the idea of the internet was going to bring us all together, dictatorships would fall, there'd be no borders, and we'd all get on well and sing Kumbaya. And precisely the opposite has happened. It is now entirely possible to live your own curated life, keep yourself shielded from anything you don't want and not interested in. And some would argue that's exactly what we should do, which is, you know, it's our lives, we should have the experiences we want and sod the sort of broader community. But it is a new era in that sense.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. And thank you. I have been struck, certainly, in this idea of the sort of fusion of collective grief and private grief, that quite a lot of people either, you know, they do vox pops with the queue. You know, you can hear people in the sort of doing of the things saying, the interview says, why have you come? Or where have you come from? It normally starts with, I've come from Darlington, or I've come from whatever they've come from. And I've come for my dad. I lost my dad, and the Queen represented so much of what he represented to me. There was a sort of sense of a set of values, a something that has gone or ended, and somehow to come and do the queue and the paying of the respects is a way to keep the dad close to me somehow, to sort of I'm paying my respects to him, not so much to the Queen. In the red jacket here, hello, you had a hand. So can we get to mic down to this lady here? Hiya. I feel like I should know your name.
It's possible. No, my name's Pauline, and I just write things in the chat. Let's have a go. One of the things that, I mean, this was posed as an issue to do with the, I suppose, distinction between grief and mourning. And maybe we're still pushing those two things together.
Yeah.
I find myself a bit outside of the grief notion of it, because that seems to be predicated on people, but talking about that family connection, of people being in grieving for these significant family members. And there are some of us who have not been in that fortunate position of having had good relationships with significant people.
Yeah.
And that stops one kind of conversation going on, because you're meant to be grieving for the mother figure or the family figure. And yet that's not necessarily something which we all hold. Yesterday afternoon, I went to see To Kill a Mockingbird, and in sitting before the performance started, there was an announcement where they talked about being, you know, terribly upset because the Queen had died. Fine, and then said they'd taken the advice of the royal household, which is why the performance was going on. And I'm thinking, surely that can't be the reason. And then they said, but we will all stand for a minute's silence. And I'm somebody who doesn't stand for the national anthem. I never have done, you know, and, you know, I try and pretend that I don't know the words of the Lord's Prayer, all of that kind of stuff. And yet everybody rose up, and I'm thinking, I'm staying where I am, but who am I in this? And who are they in saying that we who had come to watch a play, and that one should then go right on your feet, you know. However, on a slightly lighter note, and it's possibly why it's not why I can't take the Queen particularly seriously. That's not to do with it. It's just a fact, which is she looks very much like my former mother-in-law. And means that it means that every time we looked at, oh look, that's Hazel, and that's all. But my main points were that the afternoon seemed to be to do with mourning, which we were all meant to be involved in. That notion of grieving seems to be something which you're meant to be party to, but you can only grieve under some circumstances. And this family-located grieving actually has a good number of people who are not part of that party. And that means that I find it quite difficult to talk about this thing.
Really, really interesting. And thank you, Pauline, for it's a great contribution, because you're absolutely right. And it kind of chimes with what Tommy was saying, is that there is definitely a sort of a right way. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about family, and we're going to really, it definitely feels like that's where all of this has gone to. And if, as Pauline says, if you just don't feel that, then it's even more discombobulating for you, and possibly irritating as well. The dictation of right and wrong, as mediated by a bunch of people, as we saw, just Centre Parks, amazing. As mediated by that sort of corporate decision-making forum, the comms team get together with the boss and they have to decide, what are we doing? And in your case, with To Kill a Mockingbird, what we'll do is we'll make everybody stand for a minute. That's been a meeting that's happened there, and everyone's gone, yes, I think that's probably the right thing to do on balance. It's that stuff probably, when there'll be more of these war stories, I'm sure, that come out of the near misses and wrong calls. But the Centre Parks thing, I've just enjoyed. I mean, it's been a total treat. I've loved it. Absolutely brilliant. I feel like I'm going to pick on you in the green jacket. What's your name?
Sandra.
Hi, Sandra. I'm interested to know, how are you feeling? Why did you come? What do you want to say?
So I feel sad. I haven't seen any of the jokes or anything like that on my kind of social media or in my social network. I think, so for me, probably the Queen was something like a mother of the nation in a way. And I lost my mom last August, so about a year ago. So I think it probably definitely brought back a lot of that. And I didn't have a really good relationship with my mom. I had a complicated relationship with her, but I just keep on, since the Queen died, I just keep on having these maybe dreams at night, just kind of like reminding me of my mom and constantly thinking about her. So I also can maybe relate to the family, how they are feeling, because they are still people and humans, and they...
It's interesting, you're not the only person who said to me in the last week that they're having particularly vivid dreams. Is anybody else having particularly vivid dreams at the moment? Is that, Connie, is that a known thing that's associated with a sort of grieving?
Question. I guess if there's a lot of emotion to process, your unconscious will
Yeah.
do that at night, and that might churn out quite vivid stuff.
Yeah. And I'm not sleeping at all. So that's my particular experience. I'm going to come to somebody who's watching at home. His real name is John the Vegan, but he calls himself John Randall for the purposes of the Zoom. Hi, John.
Hey, Liz.
How
Good
you
to see
doing?
you. Also, it seems really fitting. There is a beautiful sunset where I am. So it feels like that's Weymouth. But it feels
Nice.
like the golden sun, the sun setting on the day feels quite apt for the conversation.
John, you have some expertise in this area. Talk to us about what you know about the sort of collective and the individual, and how they go together in this sort of emotional processing world.
Yes, I trained in psychosynthesis therapy, which is kind of known as psychology with the soul. And part of that, it kind of believes in kind of the individual and the collective, that they are connected, the kind of the microcosm, the macrocosm. So something like you were saying about the dreams, it's not unsurprising that if all of that psychological material is in the collective unconsciousness, we're all processing that together. So there's a collective processing, and there's also the individual processing in terms of what it means for me, what it means for you. But I'm also really struck with those news when they're talking to people that are in the queue. People find it really difficult to talk from an individual perspective. People kind of go towards the generalizations of we are all feeling this, rather than being able to talk from their own experience and saying, kind of, I'm feeling this and this is what it means to me. I'm getting quite annoyed with the reporters who kind of put an emotion on them to say, you know, this must be making you feel really sad. I think people don't have that literacy to process these feelings.
So is part of the reason why people choose to go and do the stand in the queue for 30 hours because they don't know what else to do?
Yeah, I think it's for different reasons. I think people will feel pulled towards it because they're feeling something and it helps them to process it and experience it. I think also part of it is we're not taught how to feel things deeply and talk about our feelings and how to process those. And that word of permission that came up earlier, people don't often feel like they have permission to feel the things that they're feeling in their day-to-day life. So suddenly there's this national and global event where people can have their feelings witnessed, and it might be their feelings connected to grief with the Queen, or it might be that grief taps into other unexpressed emotions. And so it's a bit of a, I think it's a good thing, but I think for some people it can be a bit of a platform to have their feelings and their experiences witnessed, which a lot of people don't have in their day-to-day.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, John. Nice to see you and enjoy Weymouth. Lovely Weymouth. I feel like, is he still there? Giles. Hello. Giles Rattel, Deputy Editor at Tortoise, and you've been self-censoring a little bit this week because you're a Republican and you've been vocal about the monarchy. Have you experienced any emotions this week other than irritation?
I haven't really experienced irritation, but no emotion at all, which makes me feel a bit of a psychopath and unqualified to take part, which is why I haven't raised my hand. I mean, look, to me, this was a person who represented an institution which I fundamentally disagreed with, who an institution which I wish didn't exist, which I find demeaning. I think as a person, everyone talks about her being, I don't know, a facsimile of someone in their life. But she struck me, one of her defining characteristics was her remoteness.
Yeah.
We were never allowed to know what she thought about anything. So I offer that as perhaps an excuse for myself that I feel nothing. I chatted to my dad about it yesterday, and he said, no, I do. He'd been a public servant all his life and met Charles on a trip. And so I can see that if, you're contemplating your own mortality in a sort of way that everybody has. Especially me. And my dad is, right, then I can see how this brings stuff up.
Yeah.
But no, personally.
Not feeling it.
No. I don't feel it. What I do feel, I don't feel irritation. I do feel hope.
Oh, that's interesting. Go on.
That this is a turning point, and that finally this long reign, this long life is over, and we can begin to have a sensible, grown-up conversation about hereditary monarchy.
Do you think we will, though?
Probably not. But let's remember, this is the country that produced Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Yeah,
good movie. I'm interested to know, so we're, and there's a slight tension, Giles touched on it, the defining characteristic of the Queen was her remoteness, but the values that she sort of represent, if you were going to project onto the character of the Queen, stiff upper lip, keep calm and carry on, just keep smiling is sort of one of the main sort of reasons why she was sort of revered and admired, and she sort of did her service and all of those things. That's what people say about her and her achievements and her longevity and all of that. That's how she held the whole thing together, by being remote and by being sort of always the same and not cross about pens. We talked about that yesterday. But to me, there's a slight emotional 1-2 to do, because now she's dead. the sort of where we seem to be indulging in an encouraging outpouring of emotion, which is, and the closing of things and the standing up and having the minute of silence. There's a slightly not incongruousness there, but I wonder how much of this is because also, as Katie was talking about, and Tommy too, it feels like what we're doing is designing Britishness. How do we do Britain for the next 10 days? There's a sort of visual element to it. There's a ceremonial aspect to it. There's an emotional aspect to it. We're sort of co-creating a version of Britishness in the image of what the Queen would want it to look like. But also it's a gear change moment, like Giles was saying. And I wonder about, as Brits, with our world-renowned stiff upper lip, A, is that even a thing? And B, are we any good at A, mourning, and B, grieving? Is there a sort of national characteristic that means we're good at it? I can see Vivian going, I think we must be quite good at mourning. I mean, there's a lot of flowers in Green Park. Yeah.
Thanks. Coming back to Giles' word about hope, what I would like to see, what I would hope to come out of this is that there is a more open approach to death and dying, which is still very much a taboo area. And it's something that affects all of us at many different times of our lives. And if nothing else comes out of this, I would like to think that there is more understanding and acceptance of the power of mourning and grief and the importance of dealing with it properly.
Vivian, do you think mourning, the sort of, it's not quite the right word, procedural, but the sort of the doing of the after somebody dies phase, do you think mourning is powerful itself? Is it helpful to do those things?
I think it's vital. I think, as was said before, if you don't mourn, it will come out in physical ways of illnesses. So I think that's really important. But for many years, I was running a walk and talk group for bereaved people of different ages and stages in their lives and different backgrounds. And it was a really powerful way of people sharing their approach to grief. And it was really, even after our 8 weekly sessions ended, these groups would continue to meet on a monthly basis because they had shared a very powerful experience. And we are not good in this country, I'm not sure which country is good at it, at dealing with loss and grief. And it's something that really, really has to be approached in a much healthier way.
I do wonder whether the royal family, are they going to get to have a private service of, like a little one just for the people? Do they get to do that? Okay, so they'll have a thing when it's not all cameras and, all the presidents. Okay, interesting. I wonder how they as a family will do the other stuff. The talking about it and the being upset and no? I don't know. We don't know, do we? Katie, you had your hand up. Sorry, we need to do the mic shift. Thank you, Vivian.
So this is related. I apologize for taking us possibly down a different road, but the thing that I do feel sad about when I think about the Queen, and this relates to my sort of views on monarchy, which are similar to Giles.
We've positioned you separately so you don't gang up on us.
Is that I think it's really almost inhumane that we make them live like this. Like, I know we're supposed to think that they have this like privileged life, but actually what you're doing is forcing these people to live in this horrible like limbo where they can't live a normal life. They can't quit the life that they're born into. They have no choice, especially people who are first in line of succession. They're told that the country will fall apart and the political system will fall apart if they, like Edward VIII did, or 7th, 8th, abdicate because they don't want to be the monarch. And that to me just sounds like a horrible way to live. And I think it's changed a lot probably since Diana, because, you know, before there was 24-hour news and, you know, the internet and like all of this visibility on them, it was probably a much happier life to be the king. Like you got to go out to Balmoral and ride your horses and whatever, but now they're constantly in the public eye. They can't even grieve their grandmother in private, and they have no choice really for it. I mean, Harry's taken that choice, and like that sounds good. I totally understand why they did what they did, but William doesn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
Unless the monarchy gets abolished. And it just, you know, I wonder how much more of a happier life she would have lived if she just was a woman living in the countryside with horses and.
I can see Sarah nodding. Maybe part of this emotional processing is us thinking about, you know, being grateful that we're not royal.
and all of the countries kind of, you know, we say she was so, you know, keep calm and carry on, stiff upper lip, like she never showed her emotions, but that sounds horrible.
Yeah.
And projecting all of the nation's like wants and needs and desires on one person sounds, you know, bad.
It's definitely, I think you've said it better than I did, but the values for which Queen Elizabeth in particular was revered, that have been played again and again and again, particularly in the last week, are not massively helpful values if you're trying to process the loss of somebody you really loved. Really, is what we're saying. Go on, Matt. Oh, we're working James Love really hard on the sofa there. He's earning his money tonight.
I just wanted to lower the tone a bit.
Please do, because we're in the last 9 minutes. I was worried nobody ever would.
And this is a bit indiscreet, but it just you when you were talking about how the royals cope with private grief. This is a long time ago. On the Monday after the Diana funeral, a friend of mine, who's now quite a senior ecclesiastic, but at the time was recently ordained, had an interview with several members of the royal family over lunch, informal interview for a position at Windsor. And he called up the palace on the Friday before the funeral and said, I presume that the interview's off. And they went, no, come on down, they'll be fine. So he turns up at Buckingham Palace, you know, wearing every form of black available, just like, you know, black hat, black shoes, black, you know, black to everything, just black, right? And wanders in, and they're having a kind of, not a kitchen lunch, but they're just having a normal lunch. And he said he could hear the hoots of laughter before he got into the... And they were having a sort of do-it-yourself buffet lunch, right, this Monday. And this was just, don't forget, this was after...
A couple of vol-au-vents.
They'd been through this big kind of, you know, oh, we get it now. You know, she'd done her thing about, I say this all to you as a grandmother, you know, bowing to the coffin, walking behind everything, right? This was the Monday after. And he went in and sat down, and Prince Philip said, cider, dear boy, and went up and got the 2-litre bottle of Bulmers out. And you know when those big bottles slightly spill everywhere?
Yeah, they're very difficult to manage.
So this guy was sitting there thinking, I have no idea what's going on here. And he had no software to deal with it, because he'd expected the hour to be, you know, one of hushed reverence and, you know, this difficult time and, you know, barely audible conversation. But they were saying, so what do you think we should do with the old place? You know, Windsor, St. George's Chapel is getting a bit, you know, needs a bit of a do-over, doesn't it? What do you reckon? And everyone was laughing and gaiety of the nation. And he came away deeply traumatized. I spoke to him about 2 days after. He said, I don't know what to do about this. I'm not sure I can work with these people.
I think it's a brilliant story. Because I'm a good and kind-hearted person, my read on it is that sometimes in the saddest of times, you do just find yourself having to be a bit silly and get the Bulmers out, you know what I mean? Sometimes that is how you just have to play it.
I mean, let's hope so, you know.
For sure. And thank you for sharing. Am I the only person in London who's never met the Queen or a member of the royal family? I'm increasingly thinking I am. Sarah's got... you haven't either, James, but you're part member of the family, surely. He's been snubbed. Let's get a mic down to Sarah, please. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I didn't have so much of a contribution as more of like kind of an open-ended question, which is something I've really thought about a lot in my life, which is, why does the emotion of sadness exist? And it's not, I know, thank you, Tommy. It's
My
not
God.
What? And it's not something I've ever been able to have a satisfactory answer for. And I think it's because there isn't one. I know why maybe I feel in love, because I'm supposed to evolutionarily mate with people and bring my species forward. But why is it that I'm supposed to feel sad? Or why does sadness is something I feel exist? And I don't know, it's something I've always struggled with. My stepmother died when I was quite young, when I was 18, and it's why I switched to studying philosophy in uni to try to answer that question. And I think the best that I came up with it is when somebody dies, it's simultaneously like the most banal thing that happens and the most important thing that happens in your life. And maybe that's all that sadness is this conceptual confusion over something that doesn't have an answer. And so I think when I've been like listening, I didn't really feel sad when the Queen died. I'm American. It's not something I have a personal connection to, but it did kind of make me think in my mind all of that question I've been mulling over all of these years, which is, why is sadness something that we have to feel?
Interesting. So the conceptual confusion is just we register it as sad and we label it as sad, but actually it's just because we don't know what else to
I think so.
feel or
I think that's
something?
what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
It's like, why does this thing that will happen to everyone in their life, not dying, but experiencing someone dying, move me in such a big way? Surely it's something I should have been prepared for at this point. Why does it strike me so in these moments?
Interesting.
Like, why? I guess if you wanted to get very scientific about it, I used to think, why haven't we learned how to deal with this better? Why hasn't this emotion been erased?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, dealing with it better and erasing it are two different things. But yeah, so that's a great question. Did you have your hand up again, Monique?
So I was just wondering, can you have joy without sadness, or can you have pleasure without the opposite?
One without
I think
the other.
we probably need all those emotions to feel all of them. Can you have the positive ones without the negative ones, however you want to label them?
It's interesting that what John was saying. I know it's not quite what you're getting at, Sarah, but John was saying people in this country, at least, just aren't equipped. We don't teach or formally or informally how to talk about and process. And that's why people like Connie and Vivian are worth their weight in gold. I only wish I knew bereavement counselling existed when I lost my mum. I had no idea that was a thing. But if I did, it would be the first call. It would be the first call you would make. I mean, it's a hugely traumatic thing. Why would you just sort of feel like, oh, you just have to, get on with it? Really extraordinary. Any more for any more? Yes, Giles. He's going to go again, guys. I didn't think we'd be able to get him to say no. Yeah.
There is surely an evolutionary explanation for sadness. I mean, I love the explanation that you gave for it. But as a parent, if you didn't feel sad if you lost a child, you would be careless with the lives of your other children, and you would not pass on your genes.
True. Connie.
Yeah, there's definitely that. It tells us what matters to us, who matters to us. And also when we feel sad, we express that through our body language and through our tone of voice, and it elicits care from other people. And whether we're really grieving for the Queen or not is maybe not so much the point, but I think there's a real need for nurture and care and feeling looked after. And I think that's resonated for people a lot as well.
Super fascinating. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody for sharing some moving stories. And I think that I've made tons of notes. Like we said, people have been more careful with their language in these thinkings than they sometimes otherwise are. And what that means is that we get some really good sound bites to take away with us that resonate. I won't go through all of them, but I made some lots. We started with Monique and the permission to mourn, and this sense of this country and countries around the world, but this country, COVID, trauma and grief and all that sense of isolation, and the contrast with what we're experiencing now being a very particular aspect to the sort of week we're in now. There was a sort of really nice corollary between what Vivian talked about and what Pauline talked about, which is to say I'm paraphrasing here, that grief itself is a privilege. It's a privilege of having had a relationship with somebody that was so special to you that you end up really struggling when they're gone. Not something I'd thought about before. And this other way of talking about, that Katie summarised so beautifully, of talking about people who feel, for whatever reason, outside of what we're supposed to be feeling right now, as dictated by the sort of coverage, blanket coverage, wall to wall, whether that's because in your friendship group, as with Seb and Adele, it's just about the memes, or because you're Katie and you feel very foreign. But there are plenty of people, possibly millions of people, for whom this is something that they're not feeling. And I suppose this evening's been talking about, emotions and feelings, all of them valid, even in their absence. Matt's phrase about grief being a chronic condition, something that we've talked about repeatedly, and that sense that whatever we is, however we characterize that sense of the collective, whoever's in that gang or not in that gang, somehow when something like this happens, there's a feeling that a version of that we has been diminished. And maybe that's what we're grieving for, much more than we're grieving for a person. I could go on, but there's a lot in there. And I want to say a big thank you to everybody for coming out on a dark and not very nice evening to talk about quite difficult things. Particularly thank you to Connie for coming along and helping us navigate that. I've really enjoyed this week of Thinkins. Didn't think I was going to, but I really, really have. And yeah, I think they're those ones, sometimes you sort of get through the hour and you go home and think, I'm ready for a glass of wine and my dinner. And other times you go home on the tube and it sort of it plays around in your head. And I think this will be one of those. So thank you very much to everybody for coming in. It's been lovely to have you. And we're back next week on Thursday, I think. Sort of normal services will resume, and we're talking about Ukraine and Russia. So we'll see you then. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.